I remember the day he came into my life like it was yesterday. It had been raining all morning, the kind of gray drizzle that made everything feel slower, heavier, like the world itself had paused to take a breath. I was 32, unmarried, and freshly settled into a quiet suburb where nothing ever changed. Except that day, everything changed. I had just finalized the paperwork for adoption after 2 years of waiting, interviews, home inspections, and more self-reflection than I'd known I was capable of. I wasn't looking to rescue anyone. I hated that word. I wasn't a savior. I just knew there was space in my life, in my heart, and it ached to be filled. He was 6. The social worker let him in without much ceremony. He was small for his age, thin in a way that made me ache. His dark hair stuck to his forehead, his eyes, so large, so guarded, didn't meet mine. She knelt beside him, said something softly, and then handed me a manila folder. Inside were his records, photos, notes from previous foster families. But I barely glanced at it, because he looked up. For a single, fragile second, our eyes met. And in that glance, something passed between us. Cautious hope, maybe. A thread of connection so delicate I was afraid to breathe, lest it snap. "Hi, Jonah," I said, my voice gentler than I meant it to be. "I'm Olivia. I've been waiting to meet you." He didn't speak, but he gave a barely there nod, one hand still gripping the strap of a faded blue backpack. It looked far too heavy for him. Over the next few weeks, we learned each other slowly. He was careful, methodical in the way he explored his new world. He tested the boundaries of every room in the house without ever speaking much. But I watched. I noticed the way he counted the steps up to his bedroom each night, how he turned the faucet off exactly halfway when brushing his teeth, how he folded his pajamas before sliding under the covers without prompting. The quiet was sometimes overwhelming. I wanted to ask him 100 questions. Instead, I waited. Then came the first crack. It was a Tuesday, sometime after dinner. I was doing dishes when I heard it, a quiet hum. I turned off the tap and listened. Jonah was in the living room, building something with Legos. The sound wasn't a song, just a rhythm, something unconscious. But it was music nonetheless. I peeked around the corner, saw him swaying slightly, and smiled. The next morning, he asked if he could have orange juice with breakfast. It was the first thing he'd ever asked me. "Of course," I said too quickly, almost stumbling in my eagerness. "You don't even have to ask next time." He blinked, like the idea was foreign. But he nodded. And just like that, something shifted between us. The days became weeks. The silences grew softer, filled with the hum of cartoons, the scratch of pencils, the occasional outburst of laughter when something on TV tickled him just right. He never told me about the places he'd been before, but I started to piece it together through the quiet. The way he flinched when a door closed too loudly, how he sometimes slept on the floor even though his bed was soft. One night, I found him curled up under the dining table. "Couldn't sleep," he mumbled when I crouched beside him. Too quiet. I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my pillow and lay down beside him on the hardwood. We stayed like that until morning, and when I opened my eyes, he was watching me. Something unreadable flickering in his gaze. "You're weird," he said. "I know," I replied. He smiled. That was the night he called me Mom for the first time. Not out loud, not to my face. I only heard it through the baby monitor he didn't know I still kept in his room. A whisper, barely audible. "Night, Mom." I cried in the hallway for 10 minutes. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that Jonah had secrets. Deep ones. Buried beneath layers of silence, survival, and scars no 6-year-old should carry. And though I'd broken through the outer shell, I was only beginning to discover what lay beneath. And neither of us was ready for what was coming next. It started with the drawings. Jonah had never shown much interest in art before, but one evening I found him seated at the kitchen table, pencil in hand, head bent in quiet focus. A blank sheet of printer paper slowly transformed beneath his fingers. I said nothing at first, just watched from the doorway as he filled the page with small, careful lines. "What are you drawing?" I asked gently. He didn't look up. "A dream." I walked closer, my chest tightening slightly. On the paper was a house, tall and narrow, crooked at the corners. The windows were blacked out, and there were stick figures standing outside, 2 adults, a child in between. The child had no face. I reached out to touch the edge of the page, unsure whether to praise or ask. "What kind of dream?" Jonah shrugged. "The kind that wakes you up." That night, I sat at the edge of my bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind wandered back to the thick folder of records I had buried in the bottom drawer of my desk. I hadn't read most of it. I had promised myself that the past didn't matter as much as the present, that I would let Jonah tell me what he needed to, when he was ready. But something about that faceless child haunted me. Days passed, and his drawings continued. Always houses. Always the same little figure. But sometimes there were more shadows, sometimes fire, sometimes a door hanging open with nothing beyond it but pitch black. I finally asked the caseworker to meet with me. She arrived one rainy Thursday, her coat still dripping as she stepped into the foyer. "He's adjusting remarkably well," she said as I handed her a cup of tea. "He hasn't had an episode in months, which is unexpected." "Episode?" I echoed. She froze. Her eyes searched mine, realizing I hadn't read far enough. "I thought the psychologist's report was included in your copy," she said quietly. I nodded, numb. I didn't read it. We sat in the living room, the tea forgotten. "He was found alone," she began, her voice careful. "Locked in a storage closet for over 30 hours before someone discovered him. There was an incident in the home, his last foster placement. A domestic situation that escalated badly. Police got involved. They think he hid." A cold wave rolled through me. Was he hurt? Not physically, but emotionally, she trailed off, shaking her head. "They said he was humming when they found him. Sitting in the dark, holding a toy dinosaur. Wouldn't speak for days." The humming, the drawings, the silence. I wanted to weep for that little boy. For all the versions of him that had existed before I came along. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in his doorway long after he had gone to bed, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. And I knew then that loving him wasn't enough. I had to understand him. Protect him not just from the world, but from the shadows inside his own memories. Weeks later, I found him in the hallway, staring at the wall just outside his room. "What's wrong, baby?" I asked, crouching beside him. He tilted his head. There was a sound, like someone whispering. My stomach tensed. "Where?" He pointed to the vent. I leaned close. "Nothing. Probably just the wind," I said, but my voice wavered. Jonah didn't respond. He simply turned and walked back to bed like he knew something I didn't. The next day, he drew a new picture. This time, it was our house. Only, it wasn't quite right. The walls were crooked. The roof sagged. And in the window of my bedroom, he had drawn a shadow. Just a shape. Watching. And beneath it, a small line of text in shaky, childlike print. "He lives here too." I stared at the drawing for a long time, my heart caught between concern and dread. Jonah had given me his love. But what else had come with him? Jonah is 18 now. I still can't believe how fast the years have gone. The little boy who once whispered to vents and hid his drawings under the bed now towers over me, broad-shouldered, calm-eyed, quiet in that way that doesn't beg for attention, but commands it nonetheless. He has his own world now, friends, music I don't understand, ideas too big for the small house we built together. But no matter how far he stretches outward, he always returns home. To me. Our life has become rhythm again, me with my books and morning coffee, Jonah with his late-night walks and long showers that leave the mirrors fogged for hours. He's still quiet, but not in the way he used to be. Not closed off. More deliberate. There's a gravity to him now. A weight behind the way he looks at people, like he's always searching for what they're not saying. I feel it most when he looks at me. Like tonight. We were in the kitchen, just the two of us, our usual Saturday ritual. Him at the counter peeling oranges, me at the stove stirring something that smelled better than it tasted. He was talking about his photography project, something about shadows, contrast, moments that feel like memories. "I took one of you yesterday," he said suddenly. I glanced over. "Without telling me?" He smirked, that easy, lopsided grin that has only grown more dangerous with age. "You were reading by the window. The light hit your face just right." I rolled my eyes, laughing it off. Bet I look like a tired librarian. He didn't laugh. "You looked peaceful," he said. "Beautiful." The word landed too softly, too easily. I stirred the pot a little harder than necessary, suddenly aware of the quiet between us. Jonah peeled his last orange, then leaned forward across the counter, resting his chin on his palm, watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "You've changed," I said, trying to shake the sudden tightness in my chest. "So have you," he replied without missing a beat. Later that night, I found the photo he had taken. My laptop was still open from earlier, and his files were synced to my cloud drive. It was simple, really. Me, half turned toward the light, book forgotten in my lap. The window behind me glowed with late afternoon sun, and my face, it was soft, almost young, like someone who hadn't carried so many sleepless nights. And in the bottom corner, almost invisible in the reflection of the glass, Jonah, his silhouette, framing the moment, watching. The photo unsettled me, not because it was invasive, but because it was intimate. It captured something I hadn't known was visible, a closeness I'd taken for granted. We've always been close. Too close, maybe. It's hard to explain the kind of bond we've built. He's not just my son. He's my confidant, my reminder that I am still needed, still loved without condition. And yet lately, there are moments when his presence feels heavier, charged, like tonight. I was sitting in the living room, lights low, the rain tapping gently against the windows. Jonah came in from the hallway, a towel around his shoulders, hair damp from a late shower. He didn't speak at first, just sat beside me, close enough that our arms brushed. "I like when the house is quiet like this," he said, his voice low. "Me too." He leaned back, stretching one arm behind me across the sofa. Not touching, just there. Then he said it, soft, careful. "Do you ever wish things had turned out different?" I turned to him. "What do you mean?" "If you'd married someone, had your own family, real family." "You are my real family, Jonah." "I know. I just mean, I took up all the space. There wasn't room for anyone else." I stared at him, unsure what to say, because part of me wanted to deny it, and part of me knew he was right. I had built my world around him, not out of duty but by choice. And he, in return, had grown into it like ivy on a wall, wrapping around every part of me without ever pulling away. He turned toward me, eyes soft. "I wouldn't change it, you know." Neither would I. The moment lingered longer than it should have. And for the first time in years, I didn't know how to name what I was feeling. He was no longer the little boy I had rescued. He was a man now. And somehow, without either of us noticing, the space between mother and son had narrowed, become something tender, quiet, and just a little too close. I've never believed that love has rules. Society gives us blueprints, what it should look like, how it should behave, who is allowed to feel what, but I've lived long enough to know that real love doesn't follow any of that. It just arrives. Quietly. Fiercely. Without permission. And that's exactly how it felt now. With Jonah. We didn't talk about it, not directly. But everything changed that spring. The way he lingered when brushing past me in the hallway, the way his hand would rest a moment too long on my shoulder, the way he looked at me when I was laughing, as if memorizing the moment. It should have scared me, but it didn't. One Sunday afternoon, we were working in the garden. The sun was warm, dappling through the leaves, and the air smelled like earth and new beginnings. I was kneeling by the rose bushes, gloves covered in soil, when Jonah appeared beside me with 2 lemonades in hand. He sat down cross-legged beside me, handing me a glass. "Remember when you couldn't get me to go near dirt?" he asked. I laughed, brushing sweat from my brow. "You said worms were evil." "They are." He was close, closer than necessary. I could feel the warmth of his arm against mine, the soft hum of his breath when he laughed. There was no pretense between us anymore. No accidental moments. It was all intentional. I reached for his glass instead of mine, an old joke between us, and he let me. Our fingers touched, and stayed. And when I looked up, he was already watching me. "You're beautiful, you know," he said. Quiet. Serious. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, I leaned forward just slightly, resting my forehead against his shoulder. And he held me. We stayed like that for a long time, the garden forgotten, time suspended. There was no urgency, no shame, just breath, skin, heartbeats. It wasn't about crossing a line. It was about the fact that neither of us wanted to go back. That evening, we were on the porch swing, the golden light of dusk casting long shadows over the yard. I was curled beside him, his arm around me, and my head resting where it had always fit, on his chest. We didn't say anything. Didn't need to. His hand moved slowly, absently, tracing circles along my shoulder, and I found myself closing my eyes, until a sound made me blink. I turned, just slightly, enough to see across the street. Our neighbor, Mrs. Kendall, was standing by her mailbox, frozen. Her eyes were locked on us, on how closely we sat, on how tightly we held each other. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just turned and walked away. A ripple of unease ran through me, but Jonah only pulled me closer. "I don't care," he said into my hair. "Let them think what they want." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let the world fall away and stay in that moment forever. But the world has a way of clawing its way back in. 2 days later, I heard whispers at the grocery store. Mrs. Kendall and another neighbor, speaking in hushed tones near the produce section. My name. Jonah's name. Words like unusual closeness and inappropriate. That night, I sat on the edge of Jonah's bed, the weight of it all pressing down on me. He looked up from his sketch pad, his face calm, but his eyes sharp. "They're talking," I said. "Let them. It's not that simple." "It is," he said. "It's simple for me. I love you." My breath caught. He didn't flinch, didn't walk it back. "I don't mean like a son," he added, his voice steady. "And I don't think you mean it like a mother anymore." Silence. Heavy. Sacred. "I don't," I admitted. He reached for my hand. "Then stop pretending." We sat there for a long time, nothing between us but truth. And when I leaned forward, when he met me halfway, it wasn't reckless. It wasn't impulsive. It was the most honest thing I'd ever done. We didn't speak of it after. Not in the way people expect. There were no labels, no confessions. Just a quiet shift. A new rhythm. The kind you fall into when you stop denying what you already know. Let the world call it what it wants. We had already chosen each other. And we weren't going back.